Good morning folks and welcome to the workshop. You may or may not know that recently I've been working with George Barnsley and Sons up in Sheffield to bring on and develop tools. And part of that process has been developing strops. Now strops, you can get strops all over the place. They've been used for a very long time and for very, very different purposes. But the types of knives that we use need to be sharp. So a strop is an absolute necessity in any workshop. And there are a number of strops we can go through with different compounds. Here is just a small selection. But one of the exciting things is this. This is a round strop. Now, in all the years that I've been working leather, I've never seen a round strop for sale. Yep, we've all taken the broom handle and stuck a bit of leather to it, but nobody's ever developed a round strop. So I decided to. Gave the design to George Barnsley because they turn as well as make tools, and this is what they've come up with, and it has our logo on, and it's absolutely gorgeous. George Barnsley and Sons, go to the website, fill your boots, buy your strops there. But when you get your strops, what do you do with it? How do you load a strop? And that's what I'm going to talk about briefly here. So I've got a number of strops here that have been loaded. I've got flat strops. So just to touch on that, the flat strops are available, large and small. I don't have a small flat strop here. I have a small round strop, and it's a similar sort of size, except flat. But you can have it grain side out or flesh side out. Now, if you're not entirely sure why you want either, the grain side is a coarser part of the leather, and it will hold more compound. So this is really good for a very abrasive strop. It's almost back to honing. You can put a dark compound, a very coarse compound. Here I've got a grey, which has a cutting compound of 9, a polishing of 1. So it's very abrasive, and the black that you see is actually the metal that comes off the knife. And then we can flip it over. This is the grain side, so much smoother, and it also has grey. Yet, because the leather's smoother, it's beginning the polishing process. I've then got another strop, flat again. This occasion, both are grain side. One is holding a blue, which is a 50-50, and the other is holding a pink, which is a 7-3. So this has a cutting compound of 3, but a polishing of 7. So it's a 3-7 rather than a 7-3. And what we can do is we can come down. So if we have a knife that may have a nick or a burr, we can start off on our flesh side, and we can be quite firm with that knife, always drawing away from the blade, and this is what takes the metal off. I don't want to do this too much on here because this knife is actually quite sharp, at which point we can flip it over. We're now going to the grey and the grain side. So this is a little kinder to the blade, doesn't take off as much, but it's still fairly coarse. At which point, when we're happy with that, we can come to our 50-50, our blue. And this begins our polishing process. And again, not like the cowboys where you're whipping it up and down, because there's a good chance of you cutting your leather like that, but putting it on, getting an angle, and push. And the angle that you're looking for, if you're aware of sharpening, I use 17 degrees on mine. So if I am putting my knife on a stone, the blade is angled to 17 degrees. That's what gives me the cutting edge of the bit. But when I put it on a strop, I want to perhaps take it to 20 degrees. So I'm going beyond. So I'm polishing the bit that cuts. So a little higher than you would have put it on your stone. And at which point then we can flip this one over, go to our pink, which is our cutting of 3 and our polishing of 7. So this is now beginning to create a mirror-like finish, and at which point then that should just sail through our leather. Something a little thicker perhaps. Bit of bridle, 4.5mm bridle in one cut. That's testament to the knife as well as the strop, but suffice it to say, it's sharp. So then we come on to our round strops. Why round? How many knives do we have that are curved? And the style of knife that we're talking about here is a bird's beak blade, an internal curve. There are two curved knives, an external and internal. So if we look at the half head, to strop the half head, we'd have to come back to the flat. So here we'd roll the knife. So we start elbow out, pull away, and we turn. And if you have a full head, you'd do this 4 times off each quarter. Nice and firm, nice and slow. And then we turn it over and we do exactly the same going the other way. No whipping, no flicking it up and down. And we're happy with that. We can come to a grain side on a grey. Much slower with a big knife like this. We don't want to be particularly quick because that speed will bring about problems. So it's very slow, very deliberate. And again on the other side. And here we give it a go. Again, 4.5mm bridle. And that just sails through. Beautiful. So an external curve, we go to a flat strop. An internal curve would go to a round strop, because this now fits the curve of the blade. For years, we've been taking a curved blade to a flat strop, and we've been using the corner of the strop. If we do it flat, we'll change the profile of the blade, or we'll only ever sharpen just the tip, and that's not enough. So this is what we've been doing for years and years. Well, that's ridiculous. Well, we need a round strop. So here, I've developed a round strop. George Barnsley has made them. And as a result of that, you can see the metal picking up. It's going black where I'm going over it. And this is going to keep our blades razor sharp. Bit ambitious for a clicker knife. 2 hits goes through. We have perhaps something a little larger. I feel like one of those blokes down the market flogging plates. It's a deal, it's a steal, it's sale of the century. Don't buy 1, don't buy 2, buy 4. That sort of thing. 4's a good number. But here, this is a much thicker blade, stronger steel, less flex, but we can get really into that curve with this strop. And that is working beautifully. And that does go through in one hit. Round strops, who'd have thought? When you buy your strop, it's got to be naked. So whether you decide to have glued, so this one is glued, and here we can see all the way round is leather. This particular one is grain side out, so you can have grain or flesh on the round, grain or flesh on the flat, large or small. You can also decide to have stitched. So this is a red leather. This is good for a polishing. because it's a tighter grain. Still load it up with the compound, not an issue with that. It's pretty, but it's stitched. It's an option. But let's say, for instance, you order your strop, it comes naked. You will also get to choose your compound. Now, when you're buying the compound from George Barnsley or buying the strop, the compound that you choose, you'll be given a number of choices. And there is a very broad selection of compounds available. There's hard and there's cream. So the compound that I'm going to be using is hard, so it comes on a block. You can buy cream. There's all sorts of different compounds out there. You will find an awful lot of what you find as jeweler's rouge will come in a paste, and you can rub the paste onto your leather. That helps loading the strop. It's much easier to apply. But the colours go a little bit awry. It's like the jeweler's rouge tends to be for the gold. Red. Now red in a harsh compound is a dark colour, so it would be classed as abrasive. You can't say a colour and expect it to be the same abrasion quality as any other colour. Every company seems to have it at their choice. It really is very difficult to work out. I'm going to tell you what I use. I use a grey, which is a cutting compound of 9 and a polishing compound of 1. That's very abrasive. Okay, don't focus on the colour, focus on the cutting and polishing element, the 9 and the 1. Because if you get a good company providing your compounds, they will tell you what it's for. Whether it's coarse, extra coarse, medium, fine, extra fine, or high polish. That's what you're looking for. Don't focus on the colours, and certainly don't just ask for, well, I'll have grey, please, expecting a harsh compound, because you may get some company that have manufactured it in somewhere, and they've decided grey is actually their finest. So there's no rhyme or reason to the colour code. It's not a standardised system. But what I'm using is grey, which here in the UK is classed as a harsh compound. Then I would go down to a green, and a green is a coarse, so below harsh, and that is a cutting ability of 7 and a polishing of 3. Then I'd go down to blue, which is a 50-50, which is a good mid-range. If you're not entirely sure, if you buy a flat strop and you decide to go for a flesh side and a grain side, a really good choice would be a grey and a blue, because the grey is going to deal with all the harsh issues that you may have, but the blue is a really good, safe 50-50 mid-range that will both hone, strop and polish your blade. Not to a mirror's edge, but it certainly be enough to get it sharp enough to work. Blue's a really good colour. If you're then looking at high polish, we're coming down to pink. Pink is a 7 or 3 and 7, so a cutting ability of 3 and a polishing of 7. And then we go down to yellow, which is the superfine, which is a cutting of 1 and a polishing of 9. So that's a really good finishing colour. Unless you want absolute mirror finishes, if you're a knife collector and you're using strops for other knives, then that's perhaps a very good option. But certainly for leatherwork, I would say grey, blue, green, yellow, sort of combine jumps, skip one and have a bit of a jump. You'll be absolutely fine. But what do you do when you get your strop? It comes here. If we just get our compound, you won't get a block this size, you'll get a block much smaller. But I don't have any of the Diddy blocks, so I'm going to have to use a big block. If you get your strop and you just rub that on there, you'll get an element of adhesion, but it won't really stay. A really, really nice thing to do is to get an oil. Now here I'm using mineral oil. because mineral oil is good for wood, it's good for leather, it's food safe. It's good for your chopping boards as well, but it's really nice for handles of tools. We can just apply a little bit of oil. In fact, to be fair, I've got a far better cloth that's already loaded with oil here. We'll just give it a light coating all the way around the outside. This opens the pores up, if you like. And this now helps the compound stick. And we can see that that's going in a lot easier, a lot smoother. And we can go all the way round. If you buy a round strop, you can go around 1/2. You could put grey on one side, turn it over, put yellow on the other. It works a dream. So that's our strop taken care of. A light touch of oil. Over the oil, we rub the compound in. As simple as that. They come gorgeous, they're beautiful, and then all of a sudden we mess them up. And at which point then, we are ready to strop. And here, we can immediately see, even though this is a very fine compound, it's still picking up the metal from the blade. That picking up the metal from the blade is actually polishing that edge. And there we go. That is done. If you decide to go for the stitched version and the colour leather comes, exactly the same thing. We oil the leather. It'll still take it. Here I'm going to use a blue. And that loads up exactly the same way, and I'm turning it as I'm loading it. You don't need a huge amount of compound on your strop to do the job. Stay away from the stitching. You don't need to run your knife over the stitching. It's there to look pretty. So you don't need a massive amount. We don't need to rub and rub and rub, because it will just cake. And if it cakes, it's not really doing its job. We want to rub it into the leather so it combines with the fine grain. It sits in those pores that the oil has opened up, and then it does its job. It does it with the leather. Truth be told, your final strop could be a naked piece of leather. It doesn't have to have anything on it at all. Just rubbing a knife up a piece of leather will affect its shine. And you can do your last stroke without any compound whatsoever to bring that blade to a super shine. Now, you're not going to pick it up on here, but this is beginning to pop. So this is a blue, this is a 50-50. And that comes out absolutely gorgeous. Give that a little bit of a clean. Beautiful. So folks, we're there. Round strops, large and small. Flesh side in the russet and grain side in the russet, glued. Grain side stitched, albeit the stitched may or may not be on the website yet, so you might have to hang fire on that. Flat, grain side, flesh side, large and small. They are versatile. If you are able, if you think, well, do you know, I'm going to have 4. You can get a flat with a grain side and a flesh side. That's your harsh end taken care of. That could be your grey and grey. It could be your grey and green. So you could put grey on the flesh side, green on the grain side. That's a really good top end strop. We can then do a second one where we would perhaps do a blue and a pink, or a pink and a yellow, where we're looking at fine polishing. In the grand scheme of things, do you need to go as super fine as yellow? If you really want to polish your knife, yeah. If not, no. A blue and a pink would be absolutely fine. So that's those two taken care of. 4 compounds on 2 strops. We can do exactly the same with the round. Now we can have a flesh side. The difficulty with the flesh side is it's quite coarse, so the flesh side tends to suit a more coarse compound, and as a result of that we could have a grey on there, but we could do grey on one side and blue on the other. So we're coming down, and we have the grey for the harsh, but the blue, whilst it's on flesh, will actually make it slightly coarser, but will still be very, very effective. And then we can have a grain side round, and we can do exactly the same again. We can perhaps do blue on one side and pink on the other, or yellow on the other, whichever combination you feel is necessary. You can overlap your compounds. You can use the same compound twice, because you will get a different effect if you put a blue on a flesh and a blue on a grain. It's coming down. The leather really helps with that. So there we go, George Barnsley and Sons. I'll stick a dinky link at the bottom for you to have a look at, cut and paste if you want to, and I'll certainly put a link to the website in the description below. But that's what's available, that's what's come up. I came up with these, I'm really proud with them. They are an absolute boon in the workshop because you make do. You struggle with what you've got and just think, well, that's it. But truth be told, you don't need to. Get the right tool for the job, it will do the job well. And this does the job really, really well. I love them. Yeah, I came up with it. Yeah, of course, this is a bit of an advert as well as teaching you how to load your strop. But ultimately, you need to know they're out there because they're really practical and useful. If you come to the workshop, you'll use them here, but you have the option of, if you want to, of buying them. They're available. Some people, I can make that. Brilliant, hats off to you. And now you know what combination of the leather you need to apply and what combination of compound you need to apply. But for those of you that aren't able to make your own or source them, they're available for sale. Folks, I hope that helps. I hope it answers a little bit of a quandary in relation to what do I do with the leather when I get it and how do I apply the compound. You can see it's really easy. Loading a strop is not difficult. But if you forget that little bit of oil at the outset, it makes it a lot harder. And the biggest problem is people overload the strops. You don't need to. So go, buy, enjoy, and let me know what you think. Take care.